One of the most common polygonal operations actually performed in polygon modeling is, of course, the bevel. So let's have a look at our bevel operator. Let's just grab these edges. Now the bevel will work on points, edges, and polygons, but I'm just going to demonstrate it on edges and then quick maybe bevel in a point or a polygon just to show how it works. But in essence, the window will be the same no matter what. Now the first slider here is the distance. This actually shows the size of the bevel. Now it's dependent on these two selections here. Also, if you're trying to make a uniform bevel, make sure that your scaling is also uniform. If you have non-uniform scaling, your bevel may not actually appear in a uniform way. So just freeze off the scaling and then it should work. So what is it exactly dependent on? Basically, you have here the type. So how is it going to measure the distance? Is it going to measure the bevel width, i.e. the actual width of these polygons here of this new bevel? Is it going to measure the bisectors, or is it going to measure the distance along the adjacent polygons, or i.e. the newly created polygons here? Now basically what this means is depending on what the size of your bevel is, so for example if you have a very short edge and a very long edge, it's going to work anyway. So let's just try and grab a very short edge here and some long edges right here, and bevel maybe these here as well. So we'll just grab these guys and do a bevel on that as well. So now what you'll see is that the distance, if I just had it in uniform, you're going to start getting, you know, a very large scaling here, but then it sort of falls down there. Whereas if I use the bisectors, there's a lot more fine tuning in the smaller areas with these smaller polygons, or with these smaller edges. So basically allowing you to bevel a long edge and a short edge quite conveniently. Okay, and then we have relative selection. So basically if you're using a very large object or a very small object, it might be better just to do relative to selection rather than the SI units. Now the center basically defines how the bevel fall off is going to, or how the bevel is going to be oriented. Is it going to be sort of smooth along this line and the fall off sharp, or not? I'll show maybe that on a little bit simpler example. So let's just delete the top bevel. There we go. And we have now our bevel here. We'll just open up the operator as that and go into a side window. And you'll see, for example, right here, we have that bevel. So if we actually change the center, you can see is it going to be more oriented towards the top or more oriented towards the bottom. And especially in combination with rounding, that can give good results. Okay, so now let's actually, in fact, let's add another bevel here just to create a little bit more confusion. There we go, and adding another bevel. Okay, so one of the things is managing collisions. So basically managing collisions just ensures that you have sensible geometry by automatically collapsing vertexes that get too close. So you can see that this bevel actually does not make geometric sense, but managing collisions, then it will automatically collapse and get rid of points that are not needed. So that's quite good to make sure that you have good geometry. Uniform mitering, basically what it will do is it will try and either preserve the geometry or preserve the shape of the bevel, or create sensible geometry depending on whether you have it on or off. In this case, it's usually sensible to have the collision management on, but if you have a special case where you need it turned off, that can be. Then you can also automatically define to have hard edges along the contour of the bevel itself. You can see now that there's a hard edge marked right here. So if I just lock this open and unselect this, you'll see immediately that you then get this sharp bevel look, which may be useful in certain cases. You can also see here the lines are immediately there. Or we can have sharp edges just on a 3+ edge junction. So just where more than 3 edges join in, that we then have sharp edges or hard edges. And then of course the other one is we can define here as of when we're actually going to have a nice rounding off or not of the normals. So next we can actually have an automatic rounding, which we can enter in here, but actually I think I'll just do a simple, go back to my simple bevel of just 1 on there to demonstrate this. So we'll just pull this up, and again we can also just see here, for there we can see where 3 edges meet. We can now have a nice hard edge if we wanted to just to give a nice look to it, maybe again for mechanical modeling or something that might be useful. So rounding basically adds edges in there. And we have a lot of control over how that rounding will look. So if I just go in here, and we'll just grab this guy. So now I can, first of all, create a sharpness. So basically that's very similar to pulling, scaling Bezier handle. So is it going to go closer or further away? With no sharpness, it's just basically a flat with tessellation. And then with a lot of sharpness, it's trying to create as much of a corner as it can. Next, we can have the tessellation on the junction to be on or off. Again, this can be very useful, one either for preserving shape or for actually creating a valid geometry. There's a lot of control over how you want it done. Again, we can have a diamond or a plus control, and we can have a lot of control over the angle as opposed to when it will actually start tessellating. This is, of course, a 2-edge junction, and this is a 3, so changing the slider in this case is not going to do much. But if you had two angles coming to meet each other, this would be the slider that tessellates as of when is there going to be a junction, as of what angle. And finally, we have a control of an extrapolation. So if I want the, for example, the rounding to be inward, then I can have that scale in. If I want it to be sort of pushed outward, you can see here, then I can actually push it outward. So maybe creating a nice edge outward, or creating a sort of a little bit of a filleting in there like that.